humility is one of the most important qualities which you must have. Because if you are humble, if you make people realize that you are no threat to them, then people will embrace you.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Mark Beal has served as a public relations practitioner and marketer for 30 years and has led the strategic development and execution of award-winning public relations campaigns for Fortune 500 corporations. His campaigns have leveraged some of the world's most popular sports and entertainment properties, including the Olympic Games, FIFA World Cup, Super Bowl halftime show, the Academy Awards, and the Rolling Stones. With expertise in public relations, marketing, and Generation Z, Mark is regularly invited to conduct media interviews and deliver keynote speeches on how Gen Z will transform media, marketing, the workplace, pop culture, and society. And as I explained before we hit record, Mark, I am trying to get several Gen Z experts in here. I think, as always, the younger generation's being dismissed as, lazy or, they don't want to work hard, whatever. And so I Googled Gen Z expert, and you were the first guy that popped up. So thankfully, I must have hit you on a weekday. You agreed to be here. So welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled that you're here.
Mike, thank you very much for having me. I love to be here and look forward to it.
Yeah, well, the intro is very brief, obviously. You've got a very robust background. So please take a minute or three and tell us what more do we need to know about you personally and professionally?
Sure. Appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, you covered the career pretty well, at least what I call the first 30 years. Now I'm in my next 30 years. But those first 30 years working for a leading public relations and marketing agency based in New York. For the first 14 or 15 years, I was an executive there. And for the last 14 to 15, I was one of the owners of the agency. And as you mentioned, we worked with category-leading companies and brands that you and your audience know well, but they were investing in things like the Olympic Games as a sponsor, investing in things like the Super Bowl halftime show. And so they'd come to us and say, how do we create a campaign around this? How do we activate around this? And for many of those years, 2005, 2010, 15, the focus was how do we activate, but how do we engage these people called millennials, right? And so most of our research, all of our campaigns would all focus on millennials, at least in the 2000s. And so that became the inspiration for everyone always asks, why Gen Z? And so what happened there was I was into my next career teaching at Rutgers University, where I teach public relations and marketing courses. And it was around 2017, I left a class one day and I said, millennials are the focus, but come 2025 and beyond, Gen Z will become the focus for brands from a marketing perspective and employers from a recruiting and engaging perspective. So I just kind of started in that 2017-18, just read everything read every study, read every survey, read every article, and still do to this day. It's one of my habits. I wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. and I start reading and I gather all that. And that kind of turned into this next career, which again, currently full-time professor in the Rutgers University School of Communication and Information, teach 300, 400 level and graduate level courses. And it's so rewarding. And then as part of that, most of those students are Gen Zers. So in the classroom, I always lead every class with 15 or 20 minutes of what I call real-time real-world marketing. And in real time, I'm getting their feedback on a campaign, whether it's working, whether it's not, whether it's engaging them, whether it's not. And so I've got my own little think tank incubator, which is fun. And as I say in my career, I've gone from what I call a focus on what I call profit, meaning I led new business for our agency. How do we win new business? How do we get? So really my focus now is purpose. How do I help others get to where they want to get to? And so I spend a lot of time outside my day job teaching, just giving back and helping former students, current students, people from around the country who are in a career change and have lost their job. And I try to help them get their next job just as my way of giving back. So that's become a purpose. And I've probably placed, I don't know how many thousands of my students in their internships or in their jobs by leveraging my network. So the focus today, like I said, is really on purpose, leading in a purposeful way, where for most of my career, the focus was really how do we get clients? How do we keep clients? How do we create these campaigns? So really enjoying what I'm doing now.
Yeah, well, very, very impressive. I've seen videos of you on podcasts and some of your speeches and all. That's very impressive. We're going to get into that quite deep. I do want to ask you a couple questions on the leadership topic. So, if somebody spotted you, you're kind of semi-famous. You're somebody. So they, oh, Professor Beal, what's your philosophy of leadership? And you were obviously in a rush to go into your next class. What would you say? What's your elevator pitch? Your Mark Beal's philosophy on leadership.
I'm smiling because just a week ago, one of my students who's in a leadership course at Rutgers said, I have to interview a leader. Can I interview you? And that was probably the first question she asked. And I used some terms that I probably overused, but I said, not just today, but in today's world, a leader to me is innovative in the way they think. They're not just kind of set in their ways. They're not, you talked about AI a little bit earlier. They're not putting their hand out and saying, oh, AI, I don't want to get involved in AI. I don't, instead, they're immersing themselves in it. How can AI help our company? How can it help our team? So innovative, transformative. They're consistently transforming the way they lead, the way they collaborate, the way they work with their teams, their people, all those kinds, right? Again, there was a great Fast Company article that came out in February that I use now in my Gen Z keynote speeches that says, Gen Z isn't just quitting. They're leaving outdated leadership. And so the problem may not be them. It may be you leaders because you're stuck in your ways. You're stuck with the status quo and all that. I think the third is, I kind of dropped it earlier, but I said purposeful. And what I mean by that is they actually care about their people. They care about their career, their growth, their evolution, all those kinds of things. And then I think the fourth would just be collaborative. They're not sitting in some corner office, C-suite office where, they've got a security guard at the front door, but they're actually with the people. They're engaging, they're collaborating, they're mixing it up and all those things. So innovative, transformative, purposeful, collaborative are just four of the things I kind of talk about when I talk about leaders, as opposed to, things like, being a bully. The buck stops with me and I don't want to talk to you. I'll make the decisions here. We've done it this way for all these years and we're going to keep doing this way, so not that at all, but really hit on those 4 points that I hit earlier.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you. Now I have to ask you the classic timeless question, leaders, born or made?
Oh, I've had a lot of discussions lately because, again, as I mentioned, I spend a lot of time, volunteering my time, helping job seekers at all levels. Someone who's about to graduate in, December or May to someone who's been in the business 20 years and they've just been laid off. And I will get back to the answer, I promise you. And I say, there's a lot of things you can learn along the way. There's a lot of things. There's skills, there's upskilling, there's all these things you can learn, right? But then there's also other things that I think you're born with. And one of those areas, and I think it ties into leadership a little bit, but when we go and conduct interviews, I talk a lot nowadays about what I call HI, human interaction, especially because of all the AI discussion. And I tell folks, I say, you want to really master HI when you have an interview, whether it's an interview like this on Zoom, a job interview, or in person, engaging that person on the opposite side of the table. And I said, I don't mean to say this, but I think some people are actually born with that skill. It's a powerful skill, right? This engaging skill, I can have a conversation, I can have a dialogue. And some people are not. But it's also something that I don't think is easy to learn now. Like, I don't think all of a sudden you go from today, I'm not really engaging, but tomorrow I'm going to be engaging. And so I think leadership, I think everyone can learn leadership skills. Everyone can evolve their leadership approach. But I think many people actually are born leaders. And what I mean by that is they've got a lot of different elements and attributes that just are contributing to their rise to the top, we'll call it. But we all, as individuals, can learn to better lead, better mentor, better manage, all those kinds of things, right? But I think there are natural born leaders, though.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. You nailed it as far as I'm concerned. And I said that too, much like sports ability, music ability, whatever. Now, some people are just born with natural aptitude. And I think even in leadership, I think, if you look at a first grade class on the playground, you'll spot the natural leaders. Those are the boys or girls out there getting everybody else to do troublesome things, with the nuns, and all of that. So I agree with that. I want to dig one question deeper on that. My son's wrestling coach, a great coach, nationally renowned, he used to tell the boys, listen, some of your opponents are born wrestlers, athletic ability. But let me tell you something, my experience, he had been coaching for over 40 years. By that time, he said, and the saying goes, hard work beats talent when talent won't work hard.
Yes.
And I don't know whether he coined that or he stole it from someone else, but I stole it from him. And I want to get your thoughts on this, because I do think there are born leaders who don't develop it, and they often fall by the wayside. And then you get the guy who up front said, oh, Mark, I got no leadership aptitude, you know. And next thing you know, he's writing you a letter like, Mark, you're not going to believe it. They promoted me to director. He actually got it. He worked at it, you know. So your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I love the quote there. I think in a couple of my books I probably wrote, it doesn't take talent to hustle. And I am a believer in that, meaning there are people that hustle, grind, get up early, get the job, work at it. And there are others with lots and lots of talent who would rather sleep in or lay back or be kind of laid back and that sort of thing. So I think it ties a little bit into that. And Mike, you know this better than I, but not everyone actually wants to be a leader either. It's not like everybody's like, I heard a recent interview with it was a senior executive who was not the CEO, I don't think was even the CMO, but loved what their role was in the company. And I think they were in kind of content or marketing or whatever. And of course, in their role, they were a leader because under them, they had people who they were leading. But they said, I have no aspirations to be the CEO. I have no aspirations to be the CMO. I love what I do, but I don't want to be in that leadership position. So, not everyone may be born to lead or wants to lead or even wants to kind of work hard to be a leader, and that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do love that. I love that quote. And again, it ties back to it doesn't take any skill or talent just to work hard, to hustle, right? To do all those things. But it takes a mindset. It takes an approach. Real quick, I'll just add to this if you don't mind. We just in one of my 400 level marketing classes, I just gave the students one of their assignments, which is over the next 4 or 5 weeks. I want you to think about and articulate in writing your personal brand and your personal brand narrative. What does it stand for? What is it about? What are the qualities? All these kinds of things. And what I tell them is, you may not have thought about it before today, but each and every day you are the CEO of your personal brand. However, you're going to make the decision every day, not mom, dad, or somebody else, what you're going to do with your brand today. Now, your brand may sleep today. You may take a nap today. That's fine. Or your brand may go out to that career fair or may go try to get a cup of coffee informational interview. But as the leader of your brand, you're the one who's making those decisions every day. And so I see it every day. I see some folks who lead their brand very effectively every day. They're going out, they're getting meetings, they're networking, they're asking questions. And I see other folks who are taking kind of a laid back approach. But that's ultimately the decision that the individual has to make.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Well, as we get in now to the Gen Z portion of our conversation, I think it would be instructive for you as a verified, I say that, a bit of a smartass, a verified Gen Z expert, but you are, Mark, especially compared to the average layman like me and others. Why don't you start off with telling us what, in your mind, is a compendium of the good and bad stereotypes associated with Gen Z? Because there's plenty of bad. I haven't heard the good ones, to be honest with you.
And Mike, you said something earlier, which I loved, which is every generation when they, for lack of a better word, join the workplace, we're always hit with lazy, doesn't want to work as hard as our generation, right? So historically, this has always been the case, and we're hearing that about Gen Z too. But let me start first with what I'll call my 2 pillars, and I just presented this to more than 50 CEOs at a conference in New England where they asked me to be the keynote. When I talk about Gen Z in the workplace, I start with 2 pillars because I think they're really important to understand. One is, and I can say this, older generations like me, Gen X I am, we live to work. We live to get up every day, 6, 7, 8, 7 days a week and go to work.
Yep.
Gen Z doesn't do that. They work to live. They work to earn a salary, to use that salary to pursue their passions, pursue their side hustles, travel the world, whatever it might be. It's a mindset, but it's an important mindset. Older generation, we live to work. We live to wake up and work 15, 16, 17, 18 hours a day. That's not Gen Z. And sometimes I think they get criticized for that. I'd rather actually have the mindset of the Gen Zer after having lived to work for the last 30 plus years. Second, older generations like me, and again, I'm pointing at myself, we work harder, not necessarily smarter.
Yeah.
Gen Z is the complete opposite. They work smarter and not harder. And what I mean by that is, to your point, they are leveraging AI tools. They are leveraging technology. They are leveraging platforms. And I might take a task, and I know I do it. I do it all the time. And be like, okay, it's going to take me 10, 12, 15 hours to complete. And they're like, take me 15 minutes. Aren't you using this? Aren't you trying this? Aren't you using this? And so that's the idea of smarter and harder. So those are two key pillars that I think Gen Z and other generations prior to them, like I said, maybe were criticized, but it's just a different mindset. It's a different approach. And I think the live to work versus work to live, work harder, not smarter, smarter versus harder are key points. And so those are like two broad areas that I love to hit on. Then I'll just hit some others real quickly. Not my quote, but I wish it was, but it's a former CMO of MTV. The first generation to swipe before they wiped. They've had technology in the palm of their hand since the age of 2, 3, or 4. No generation before them had this. No generation before them. Yeah. So from that phone in their hand, they could launch a startup company. They can launch a 501c3. They can create content. They can conduct business, whatever they want. I didn't grow up that way. I need to physically be in an office somewhere with my monitors and this and that. They don't need any of that, right? So that's another key pillar. A couple other just areas, the most diverse, the most inclusive generation, when they go work for companies, they're looking to work for companies that truly have a diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of experience, where the key word now, and I've heard two major companies recently who guest lectured in my class come in, say, we're really emphasizing what we call the B word, belonging. We want people to, especially Gen Z, want them to feel like they belong here. They're not just a cog in the machine, but they truly belong here. They're contributing to this place, whatever organization it might be. The purpose generation, they want to, again, work for companies that have a higher purpose than just simply making a profit. They want to become customers of brands that have a higher purpose than just selling me something. So those are just, I hit on some key areas there. I'll go back to the question though, because you did ask, and I do believe this, and I've said this a lot lately, and hopefully hopefully people don't get upset with me say it. But I think every generation, Gen Z, millennials, Xers, boomers, the silent generation, within the generation, there are people that are, for lack of a better word, go-getters, hustlers, work hard. And there are other people in the same generation that are the exact opposite. And then we've got a lot of people in the middle. I think it's a generation thing. I don't think all of a sudden Gen Z is just lazy, right? I don't call them the lazy generation. So I think every generation, we've just got a mix of all types of folks who have all a different kind of mindset when it comes to things like leading, working, and all those other kinds of things. And so I don't think this generation is any different as it regards respect to that, but the way they approach things like work, I do think is different.
Yeah, I think so too. And relative to every generation and all of that, you're probably aware of this quote, but I coach this, in my executive coaching practice and training, because it comes up. Oh, Mike, hey, these young kids, they're not me. I don't know how to motivate them, and blah, blah, blah. And I put a quote up, and I don't put the author. And the quote is, in modern English, it's like, this younger generation is despicable. They have bad manners. They put their feet on the table. They don't respect their elders. On and on like this for 2 short paragraphs. And I said, who do you think made that quote? And they're like, well, that's your quote, Mark. I'm like, wrong. Steve Jobs, wrong. And then I put the slide up. Socrates, I said, fellas, think about this. Over 2,000 years ago, he was complaining about the younger generation because other people were. And I said, somehow it turns out good. And by the way, my impression is the younger generation always inherits the problems created by the older and wiser generation throughout history. So I love that quote, and I love your take on it. I do want to ask one specific question that they have a rap for, and that is a general stereotype. I've had, Mike, money doesn't motivate these guys. Money does not motivate. They'd rather work 4 days for a lesser salary than 5 days with a 15 grand increase. Your thoughts?
Great question. So I have lots and lots of one-on-one, like I said, career sessions with my students, whether they're about to graduate, just graduate, a year in, 2 years in, whatever it might be. Money is still a key element. I just had this conversation 2-3 days ago with a former student who is in her role now for 2.5 years, so probably about 25, 26, and basically said, I don't think I'm getting paid enough. This was a Gen Zer. I've had that conversation with other Gen Zers. So money is maybe I should say, maybe it's not the top consideration like it probably was for me and my generation, right? I want to make more and this and that thing. But it's definitely a consideration. It is definitely a consideration. But I agree with you. I think they're prioritizing some things. So every time one of my former students comes in to guest lecture, and again, these are students who maybe have been out in the workplace for a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. One of the questions I do ask, hey, where are you with work location right now? Are you back in 5 days? Are you home 5 days? Are you high? Whatever it might be. And it's interesting just to hear the diversity of, on one extreme, one of my students who's with a ad agency, we actually never go in the office, and I need office time. I need people time. I want to be. She goes. So on one end, even though she never goes, no, she actually wants it. She craves it a couple of days. On the other end, I've got folks going 5 days. I don't need to be in the office 5 days. I really don't need that much time in the office. And so I think to your point, there's this, I'll call it a balancing act of, I'm not maybe getting paid as much at this agency, but this agency is allowing me to work from home, or not agency company, whatever. I'm allowed to work from home 3 days a week. I'm only going in 2 days, or I'm going in 1 day. So they're kind of balancing everything. I call it, something, we'll just call it total compensation. So it's not just the salary. I'm going to take into all the factors, everything, including, I'll get into an area that I was touchy with when I present this to leaders, but mental health days. Mental health days, first of all, wasn't even in the vernacular in 2015, 16, 17, let alone. And now it is. And I'll give you one more besides that. And so I've had recent grads who've said, wow, I'm getting 4 mental health days a year. And they're seeing that as like, that's a headline. That's powerful. Yesterday, I had a former student who's in her first full-time job, and she's been there not quite a year. And she said, I love my agency. One of the things we're able to do is, and I call it being a digital nomad, but one of the things we're able to do is we're able to go for 4 weeks of the year. It's not a vacation. We can work from anywhere we want in the world, our favorite beach, our favorite mountain, wherever. We're still working, but our company also knows that I'm off at, my favorite mountain. I'm working this week. A lot of folks will call it WFA, work from anywhere. I call it being a digital nomad. But the point is, like, to her, that's a headline at her company of, wow, I really like this. And so there's this kind of balance of, maybe I could make a few extra dollars if I left here and went somewhere. But for right now, I kind of like this balance I'm getting of, going in the office a couple days a week, having these 4 weeks where I can work for. So I just think they're looking at it holistically, and it's not just the bottom dollar. It's really holistically the approach they're taking. That's what I think.
Yes, and I wanted to ask one more deeper question. I'm a boomer, so I'll be 70 years old in July, raised by Depression-era parents who really, both of them said, we didn't know if we were going to eat the next day. The times were tough. People fighting World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, all of that stuff. And my parents raised me, you got to get an education. And when you get a good job, you stay there forever, because they were raised. My father worked for the government for 40 some years. And at the end, he got his pension. He grew up in an era where his dad may not have had a job, the Great Depression. So he was ingrained, well, you get it, don't mess it up, In fact, during my dad's generation, you're aware of this, if a man was 45 years old and had 3 jobs listed on his background, he was looked down at. I can't hold a job. And then it just changed and all of that. Yeah. And so where I'm getting to is, I understand it. One of the stereotypes or stated desires is these younger kids today, they look at their working life. Many of them see it as a series of mini careers. Like, they don't often say, I'm going to have a 30-year career in finance and be the CFO. And my daughter's the same way. I have, the young set of twins, and she said, I want to do this one day. Entirely different than what she's doing today, Yeah. So any merit to that? Because where it ties in with the guys I teach and coach is, Mike, I'm not sure. I mean, I want to invest money in these guys. They want training and development. I'm willing to do it, but not if they're going to leave me in 4 or 5 years. And I just tell them, hey, invest anyway, wring as much out of the value you can get for 4 or 5 years. But no, they're probably not going to stick around for 10 or 20.
You're absolutely right. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I love this topic. So, lately with my students, I've been saying this a lot, unlike, to your point, the 30, 40 years staying with the company, careers are no longer linear. You're not just on this highway and I'm going to get to this company in year 1 and I'm going to stay there for 34 years, right? There's on-ramps, there's off-ramps, there's obstacles, there's all types of things. So that's first. Second, with this generation, well, I shouldn't say this. Let me start with, the pandemic to me completely transformed the workplace. Some of this was percolating before, but it really transformed the workplace, right? Overnight, we went from going into an office 5+ days a week to immediately, we're all remote, right? No one trained us, no one taught us. So there was a transformation there that took place. I know many, especially on the marketing side, agencies who said, boy, why should we even pay rent anymore? Let's just go completely remote. And they did. And they're still 5-6 years later doing quite well, by the way. We know many companies who've got, again, hybrid workplace, 1 day, 2 days in the office. So I think that the pandemic transformed so much. Then about a year later, 21 or so, we had what was called the Great Resignation. All of a sudden, companies are poaching employees because now all of a sudden we're back in business a year plus later. We're getting money again. We've got revenue coming in. And so all of a sudden, I had students who were at a job for 6-7 months, like, I just got this incredible job offer with an incredible salary increase. And my response to all of them was, go for it. Go for it. I'm like, why not? So to your point, yeah, there was always a stigma whenever I interviewed anybody, and I'm going to talk about now, late 90s, early 2000s. If I saw every 18 months or every 2 years, move, I'm like, well, why hire them? They're going to move in 2 years. In today's world, that's the norm. It is really the norm. It's really, and part of it, and I love where you went too, it's not just changing jobs, but it might be just changing industries, I really want to pursue this, and it's just something completely different. So I do give Gen Z a lot of credit for what I say, pursuing their passions. And another element of this, which I kind of brought up earlier, 30 years in an agency, my life was the agency, 24/7. That was my life. I would never have thought of having a side hustle. And I don't mean a side hustle compete with the agency. I just mean a passion project. Gen Z, they've got that one job, but on the side, I've got a former student who works in marketing, but on the side, she's a singer-songwriter who was recording albums and performing 2 nights a week. And so employers need to be open to it. Her employer she had a few years ago, they were so open to it. They actually celebrated your side hustle, your side passion, your side project, and try to rally the team around, hey, let's go see her perform this week. Like, I think that's great. I love that. It makes you feel good about your company that they're celebrating that after you get done your work, you're actually doing pursuing your passion.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for this. It's very instructive because I think what you've just done is level set the audience with some stereotypes that are probably true, some maybe not so true. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is, as far as, and this is where I deal with people, and I don't have all the answers. In fact, I have very few of the answers when they say, Mike, do you have any specific tips on leading Gen Z? Are there particular challenges or blind spots that most guys my age, 45 or 50 or whatever, or 30, have with these youngsters? And your thoughts?
Yeah, I got plenty of thoughts on that. Great question, by the way. I think some of what we talked about earlier. So I just finished a presentation 24 hours ago to a major Fortune 100 company. And within it, I went through the generations in the workplace, and I talked about, Mike, we'll stick with you and I, boomers and X. What do we have? Well, we have lots of experience. We have lots of successes. We probably have lots of failures. We have vast networks. We have historical knowledge. We have a lot of great stuff. Then I moved down to millennials. Millennials are, at this point, they're well into their careers, but they aspire to be in the C-suite. They may aspire to be the next leaders, but I call them the MVPs of the workplace because not only are they managing up to maybe the CEO and others, but they've just been told, oh, by the way, these new kids called Gen Z, you're in charge of them, mentor them, manage them, and make sure they know what they're doing because you're in charge of them. And if something goes wrong, it could be wrong for you, right? So they're in this tight spot where they're managing up and they're managing down. Yeah. And then you've got the new kids on the block, Gen Z. And so it goes back to, again, we talked about earlier, live to work versus work to live, smarter, not harder. So I would just have the mindset that these, I'm just going to call them the new kids because I like that. The new kids on the block, they're not Gen X. They're not boomers. They've got a different mindset. They are tech savvy. They don't maybe live to work like I do as I'm making it up, but maybe, a 50-year-old, whatever, manager, supervisor, senior director, whatever. They want to work. So I have to understand that too. The thing Gen Z tells me all the time is, don't just manage me tactically, mentor me. And so I think that's a big thing. So I always talk about don't just manage, but mentor. So manage, and you and I can, when I started my career in late 80s, early 90s, manage was, I'm making this up, but here's 15 things, get these things done by 5 o'clock a.m., report back to me. That to me is managing. That's not mentoring. Mentoring is how do you help this person get to the next level? How do you help them evolve as whatever they're doing in their role and things like that? So I think that a key element of all of this is mentor, not just manage. And then the other is just, go back to that Fast Company article that talked about outdated leadership. Be innovative in your approach. Be innovative in your leadership. Look at collaboration as opposed to just putting the hand up and saying, boy, these young people don't want to, they're lazy, they're this, they're that, the other thing. So I guess it all comes back down to this mindset that is an open mindset, an innovative mindset of, this Gen Zer or this team of Gen Zers has been assigned to me. We're gonna work together and we're gonna collaborate, and 1 + 1 = 3. We're gonna figure it out together as opposed to, well, I'm just gonna manage them, and if they can't make it, we'll get them out of here, kind of thing. So just a different mentality.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with something that I've heard and been told to me by Gen Zers, and what you've said is, this is my statement now, perhaps more than any other previous generation, the 22-year-old college graduate Gen Z is right from the start focused on, when they go to work for Acme Corporation, what are you going to do for me to help me get better? How are you going to invest in my training, mentoring, and development? Yes. They want to notice. I wouldn't have known to ask that, No,
I think that's a big part. To your point, it goes back to the idea of mentor me, don't just manage me, right? Yeah. There's a whole nuance there, but you're right. What programs are in place? How can I evolve? How can I evolve as a professional? How can I have consistent learning? Are you sending me maybe to conferences? Yeah, all those kinds of things. They do crave that. They do crave. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to evolve. They don't want to be put in a corner and just say, get the job done, get the task done. So absolutely. And they're not afraid to speak up either.
Yeah. Well, I say, a couple of my clients are sales organizations. They're like, Mike, I don't know about this. I say, no, stop. I saw you. One guy that I coach is the CEO of his own company now, but I remember him when he was the young kid, Gen Xer, the young kid. And he was our Rookie of the Year. He did well in the staffing realm. And I said, I remember you. And let me tell you something. There are still 23-year-old meat eaters out there like you that are hungry and can kick ass in sales. So where I'm going with this is a common problem that executives express to me is, Mike, it's a vicious market out there. The competition for these youngsters is pretty fierce, and we need them, and we want the cream of the crop. Obviously, everybody wants that. So the operative question, Mark, is how can business leaders most effectively attract, integrate, and retain top Gen Z talent within their organizations?
Yeah, and I use the word, and I probably overuse it. I talk about recruit and engage. So, we always talk about recruit and retain sounds like I'm keeping you here, keeping leaving. Yeah. I say engage. And so what I mean by that is just engage them, engage this desire to learn, to grow, to evolve, engage them through mentorship and meaningful mentorship, engage them with things that go well beyond, here's your task, get it done. One of the books I authored is titled ZEO. And I started using that phrase, 2018, 2019, and I was doing a radio interview, and host turned to me and said, ZEO, I've never heard that. And so after I went on Google, searched, and it really wouldn't pop up anywhere. So the point was, I always tell leaders, empower and engage your ZEOs, your 22, 23, 24, 25. I said, they got a lot more to offer than you realize. aside from their day job, maybe give them a project that you keep putting off to the side. Maybe there's this new initiative or this new business unit, but you just keep pushing off. You know what? Give them that as a fun project to work on. They will sink their teeth into it, and they'll probably come back to you 3, 4, 5 weeks later with solutions and ideas that you never thought of. So part of it, again, is engaging and empowering what I call your ZEOs, which are your Gen Z employees.
I want to give you a personal example on that. I agree with that. I explained to you before we hit record that I was kind of a generalist, C-level executive in charge of most of the back office of a publicly traded company. I had no training or expertise in any of it. So marketing department, I inherit that. And there were competent marketers in there. But here we are, over $1 billion in revenue, no social media strategy. We had a website, but no social media. So all of a sudden on the earnings calls, the analysts like, what's your social media strategy? Where we don't see you on LinkedIn, we don't see you on Instagram. So they're called, Mike, what is it? I'm like, I don't even know what the hell it is, much less have a strategy. So long story made short, in a stroke of genius, and I say this, humorously, I knew that we had 4 or 5 young ladies that had graduated from the University of Tampa. Our headquarters here is Tampa.
Okay.
And of course, I knew their generation. My kids were all over Facebook and all of that. So long story made short, I went to the marketing guy that reported to me and said, we need to do this. And I want you to turn these girls loose on them. Long story made short, they didn't have business savvy or executive skills, but they were all over it. And this is a very happy ending, Mark. We went from having no social media presence to 3 years later, we had $100 million of verifiable revenue coming through our website alone, to the point where at one point they were going to do an organizational alignment reduction and all that, and the field guys were like, do not touch that social media team. And so it was one of those young gals is a senior executive for LinkedIn today. A happy story. So where I'm going with this, the money question is, if I was an active executive today, leveraging what you're proposing, the ZEOs, I would turn them loose under the guidance of a senior leader, more senior.
Yeah.
Hey, how do you think we can leverage AI in this company, in your job, in your department?
Exactly.
And because they probably have already, one of the common complaints I have is, girl's only been here 3 weeks. All of a sudden she's saying we should revolutionize UAs. We don't even know what the hell she's talking about. So I'll stop yapping and get your thoughts on this.
Oh, no, everything you're saying is music to my ears. When I go into companies to talk about marketing, and especially more and more, I'm like, if Gen Z's become either the priority or is a priority, I may be the greatest 40, 45-year-old, 50-year-old marketer in the world. I might be the greatest, but I don't know how to market to Gen Z. And so exactly what you did, Mike, there, I would turn my 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old executives, what should be our TikTok approach? What should be our approach on Instagram? What are we doing on LinkedIn? And your point also, AI. Are we taking advantage of it? Are we fully leveraging it? Are we not? So I completely agree. And I preach that to every single company out there. Because again, you get an old marketer like me who thinks he's the greatest marketer in the world. Well, I may be smart and savvy and strategic and maybe have some good case studies, but that doesn't mean I know how to engage a 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old through things like TikTok and other content. But a 22, 23-year-old, 24-year-old, they know exactly how to do it. And so there are brands out there similar to your story. There's brands like Wendy's that recognized this years ago, and they empowered those ZEO types to run all their social media, and they've been very successful with it. So completely agree. I'm going to use your case study or your success story as a great story, because I think that's exactly what companies should be doing when it comes to things like social media and content.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Mark, you're a youthful guy compared to me. But I know you're old enough to remember when the internet came out.
Yeah.
And so you were, I assume, a classically trained marketer. You're running A/B splits and all of that. All of a sudden, you got this online advertising. Yeah. And I guarantee you some of your seniors were saying, this internet's a fad. It's a fad.
Well, it's funny you say.
I saw that. I saw that. It's a fad. It'll pass.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. So again, I probably tell the same stories to my students. They hear the same stories, but I do like key points. In fact, I just told this early this morning. That 2005, 2006, as Facebook's arriving, as social media is percolating, I think you had two camps. You had some who call them dinosaurs who said, "Oh, this social, it'll be gone next year. What's this Facebook? It's not going to let," right? And then you had others who were early adopters who said, no, we need to dive into this. We need to test it. We need to learn it. We need to try all those kinds of things. And those early adopters, I think, became the experts, the authorities, and the leaders. Well, now, fast forward 20 years to 2025, you got this thing called AI. And I was just at a conference, and I'll bring this up in a second. And I think there might be some people out there like, what do we need AI? We don't, and I think those who are the early adopters, those who are immersing themselves, testing, learning, trying, will quickly become, again, the experts. Recently, I was the host of the New Jersey Digital Marketing Conference, which very kind of the producers to ask me to be the host, which is nice. I was the keynote a few years ago. And one of the first guest speakers, one of the first keynotes this year was, I believe, if I have this title right, the former head of Google Canada. And he did his presentation and his advice to the audience. And the audience was made up of all ages, but he said, if you're just kind of starting out in your career, if you're a Gen Zer now, immerse yourself in this thing AI, become the smartest person at your company, be the leader of your company. You will go far if you do that. Don't put your hand up and resist, but dive into it. And he goes, it will take you places you never could have imagined. And so I've been drawing a lot of bridges between 05, 06 and social media rising, 25. And I'm a big believer. I tell my students every day. Now, my students, again, are juniors and seniors and grad students. I tell them every day, you're on the front end of your career. This thing called AI, I would be living it, testing it, learning it, experimenting, trying it. Yeah. And I said, don't be shocked. I told the May 2025 graduates or May 26 graduates, I said, don't be shocked. If they haven't asked yet, I'll bet you this May they will. When you go for your job interview, one of the questions is going to be, by the way, how you use AI? What do you think of, what's your favorite AI platform? And if you don't have an answer, you're not getting hired.
I absolutely agree with that. In fact, I have been advising clients at the executive level when they're interviewing the selection process for executives. I said, are you asking them that very question? All right, Charlie, potential CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, how would you leverage AI? You know our industry, you know what we do. Great and question. I got blank stares from every single one of them.
Great question.
And so I put a lot of content out on LinkedIn, and I got asked this question, Mike, the perennial is AI going to take my job? And so I had my graphics guy make me up like RoboCop, like a futuristic cop. And the top one was the guy's asking me, Mike, is AI going to take my job? The bottom one is me with a little SoundCloud saying no, but someone who knows how to use AI will.
I think I saw that because I was like, brilliant. You just captured it. You just captured it so well. But I love what you said, and you and I are aligned on this. This is going to become a more common question at all levels. The folks you're talking to are a little more senior, but if they sit there with a blank look on their face when they're asked that question, they're done. They're not going further in that job interview. They're done. So,
yes, I equate it to Gen Zers, because even though they're adept at it, they haven't thought about the job interview part. And I've talked to a couple of them. I said, look, having that blank stare when that question's asked you is akin for them to say, what's your email address? What's your cell phone number? Say, all right, I don't have an email and I don't have a cell phone. Like, what? Who doesn't have a cell phone? I mean, not a favorable impression right off the bat.
No, it's not. So I'm gonna keep hitting that with my students. I prepare them for what I call common, but what I call tricky questions that you're probably going to get asked. And we go through, and again, this is just my way of helping my students. But the AI is a question that I've added into the mix. I'm like, get ready, be ready for this question. How are you using it? What have you used? What was the most recent thing you used AI for? These kinds of questions. And I'm just trying to emphasize, be ready, especially going into marketing, really any industry, but marketing, they really need to, again, learn it, understand it, test it, try it, experiment with it.
Yeah. Well, Mark, as I understand it with Gen Z, like every generation, but particularly so, they place a lot of value on trust. They
Yes.
want to be respected and they want to be trust me, have value for what I bring to bear and all of that. So what advice do you have for existing, current business leaders? How can they foster cultures of trust, which can lead to cultures of collaboration and open communication? Some tips or techniques?
Yeah, great question. The words you'll hear out of Gen Z all the time, whether as an employee to employer or as a consumer to a marketer, is be genuine, be authentic, be real. Meaning, don't make stuff up, don't sugarcoat stuff. Tell us how it is. Be open about the state of the business, the state of clients, this, that, the other thing, right? So just this, as you just said, this kind of just open line of communication where we're informing you in a genuine, authentic way, which, as you earn trust. You don't buy trust. You don't buy it off the shelf. You earn trust. So even when any of us started a new company on day one, it takes time to earn that trust. It takes time to have experiences, right, and all those. But if all of a sudden you can earn the trust of any employee, not just a Gen Zer, now you've got someone who you probably have a really good shot at maybe engaging, keeping on board, keeping them there longer. So again, Gen Z says it all the time, just again, these ideas, be genuine, be authentic, be who you are, whether as an employer or as a brand marketing. Don't try to be the guy down the street. Don't try to be this other company, and have a open, honest, just line of communication about, again, business, the state of business, policies, whatever it might be.
Thank you for that, Mark. And I want to take another deeper bite at this apple. We talked about development opportunities and all of that. Can you give us a little bit more depth on, you're talking to my clients now. What are your recommendations for them to develop effective strategies for these youngsters want this? So we have to provide growth and development opportunities for them. Any thoughts?
Yeah.
How they can do that?
I love that you asked this. So from a marketing standpoint, there's three organizations I always bring up because they've done this very effectively. Whether you like these two organizations or not, that's beside the point. But this is marketing, but I'm going to bridge it to employer in a second. So Target in 2017 or 18 became the first company of any kind that I'm aware of, and I've spent a lot of time doing this, so I think I'm accurate, who created a nationwide Gen Z incubator, not from an employee standpoint, from a marketing. So basically, they issued an invitation to Gen Zers across America. Rick Gomez, their CMO, said, we want to connect and collaborate with you, the next generation, right? And they've been doing it now ever since. So every year they put this open call out to Gen Zers, saying, hey, do you want to be part of our 2025, Gen Z think tank, Gen Z incubator? We want to connect with you on everything from products to how we should do more in the community, to content, to advertising, to marketing, to the store experience. Converse took the same approach around 2020, 2021. They created a program called the Converse All-Stars, where they want to connect with Gen Zers on their great ideas for communities and how can we, and they even put $1 million aside. The NHL, the National Hockey League, is now in year 6 of what they call their Gen Z, I think they call it their Power Players program, where they actually collaborate with 30 or so Gen Zers across Canada and the US. I think it's one in every major, every NHL city. And they've done it now 6 years. Heidi Browning, the CEO, this is her initiative. And they're actually younger. It's 14 to 17-year-old Gen Zers. But anyway, the point is, all right, how can we make our content more engaging for you, Gen Z? How can we make, when you walk into arena, more engaging for you, Gen Z? How can we make our TV? Anyway, long story short, these leaders have opened up the boardroom and said, come on in, join me, and let's collaborate and work together. So I would just take the same approach from the employer standpoint and say, instead of sitting, so to speak, in the C-suite and hypothesizing, assuming, and trying to come up with something, just create your own little incubator in your company. Create your own little think tank. Hey, we're going to have the Gen Z think tank, the Gen Z incubator. Give it any, it doesn't matter what name it is, but the point is, you're opening the doors and you're having ongoing collaboration. Again, this is separate from everyone's day job. This has nothing to do with maybe their day job. But all of a sudden now, you're going right to the source and saying, what could we do better, different, innovative, transformative, whatever? Might as well get it right from the source, right? Or so it's the idea of just collaborating very closely and being inspired by what ideas do they have? What thoughts do they have? What are they seeing out there? And it sounds simple, but like I said, on the marketing side, I know of only three companies or brands that have done it, the three I mentioned. But it's the same approach you could take on the employer side. It's just opening that door and opening the mind and saying, let's just talk it out. Let's meet once a month and let's go through whatever the process is. But I just love that approach.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to get on the topic of counseling and having, individual conversations with Gen Z as a business leader at all levels, supervisor, department head, VP, executive. Most have no problems praising them when it's due. But I want to know if there's any more effective ways to do that. How does Gen Z receive praise? Are there preferred methods of them receiving praise that makes them feel even better when they've done a good job? And then, as important, and some of my clients, the money question is, how do I effectively counsel this young person when she's really not doing a good job?
Yeah.
Because what I find is many of them have been raised with very little accountability from their parents or school and all that, and they're prone to taking any kind of constructive criticism as a personal attack. And they don't mean it that way, but the girl's wounded. She's sitting in front of me like I just, made fun of her father or something,
Yeah, there's a lot you asked there, but I'm gonna try to focus on the areas that I do with my Gen Zers. So, couple things. Not every company, you know this better than I, Mike. Every company is structured different, organized different as far as how they conduct reviews, how they reward employees, all those kinds of things, right? But if it's we call it traditional format where maybe once a year, maybe twice, but maybe once a year, every employee at every level, as you said, is getting their formal review. Well, if we're waiting till that day to give them their formal review and we haven't had check-ins along the way and course correction along the way, I think we're already setting ourselves up to be failures, because if we're meeting that person on December 20th and we're going to tell them all the bad things they did in January, February, March, April. So I'll flip it a little bit. So as my Gen Zers go off and graduate and get their first jobs, what I strongly suggest to them, I said, even if your company doesn't offer this, you can't do it right away, but those first, what I call the honeymoon period, those first 100 days, the onboarding period, try to figure out, is there someone there that can be a mentor to you? I tell them, I often suggest someone who's about 3-4 years ahead of them, who might be on the same track, but is ahead of them. And what I would really love to see you set up is monthly, if not monthly, quarterly, cup of coffee meetings where you and this mentor, who may hopefully even be your supervisor at some level, you're sitting down together and coming up with smart objectives, smart goals, and you're doing it, and you're meeting again every 30 or 90 days, and you're going through those. And the point is, you're having an ongoing dialogue and conversation, hopefully ongoing dialogue and course correction, that when you get to that December meeting, everybody, you already had 4, if not maybe 12 meetings on this topic already. And so it's not one of these where you walk in and no one knows what's going to be said. And I was shocked by they think this and that and the other thing. So anyway, the approach is just, but I do put this on the Gen Zer, because I say, if your company isn't structured this way, which is probably not, you need to take kind of the bull by the horns here. And once you get settled in and you're there for a while, you kind of understand who the decision makers are and kind of who's my real supervisor, manager. You need to proactively say, hey, could I have some sort of just mentor-mentee relationship with you? I just want to, could we grab a cup of coffee every 30, 60 days, that kind of thing. So anyway, that's my approach. And that's what I tell when my student sends me an email or calls me, hey, I got the job. I'm like, great. Let's talk about now what you're going to do in the first 100 days. Let's talk about it. So I think that's key. So for supervisors, directors, managers, whatever that might be, I don't think it can be the once a year conversation, because I just think that's setting everybody up for failure. I really do. And I don't even think the twice a year conversation works either. But I think it needs to be these mini mentor-mentee cup of coffee meetings 12 times a year, 6 times a year, minimum 4 times a year.
Yeah, I agree with that. My natural inclination has always been that way. Well, thank you for that. Well, listen, our time is running short. I'm out of questions, but I wanted to give you an opportunity that I failed to ask some important questions. Are there any other things that we haven't discussed that you'd like to, enrich the audience with?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Mike, your questions are tremendous. Outstanding questions, just really thought-provoking questions. So thank you very much for all those. And hopefully between you and I, we're giving value to your listeners. Nothing major, just a couple of fun facts. Most media out there is saying by 2030, which we're talking 4 years now, right? 4 years and a month, at least 30% of the workplace, at least, will be comprised of Gen Zers. I think it's going to be more than that. So that means that if you work for a company or lead a company, let's say you lead a company of 1,000 employees in 2030, at least 300 would have been born starting in 1997 or after. As maybe boomers are moving on and taking, starting to produce their own podcasts, or Gen Xers are moving on, becoming professors. You're going to have more and more and more in Gen Zers. And again, I think by 2030, the number actually is going to be higher, but that's fine. Let's stick with the 30%.
Yeah.
So to your point, you made this earlier. They're going to keep coming, and they're coming. And oh, by the way, don't blink, because 10 years from now, Gen Alpha is going to show up at your doorstep and they're going to start working. But we're not going to get into them today. The point is, every year, millions and millions and millions of more Gen Zers are joining the workplace. They're going to become a bigger part of your organization. So everything you asked, I thought was so great, because it's not like this is a Band-Aid where we got to figure this out today. No, they're coming. There's going to be more next year. There's going to be more the year after. We've got to really transform and innovate how we're engaging all employees, not just Gen Zers. And so that's an important thing. I mean, when I started using the 2030 data point a couple years ago, I'm like, oh, that's like a decade away. We got time. Well, no, it's now 4 years away. It's here. So I think that's important. And so all of the people that you coach and who listen here, this is we're looking at this is a long-term thing. This is not, a short term. This is long-term leadership. That's again, we're at just the beginning.
Yeah, and as a leadership guy, when you were talking, it just prompted me to think, if by 2030 there's going to be 300 of those Gen Zers in a 1,000 employee company, I would say by 2035, they're starting to move into management positions.
Exactly.
By 2040, they're your executives,
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's interesting. We didn't go through birth years, and we don't need to do it now, but I mentioned 97 is the first official birth year. So the oldest Gen Zers today, and this kind of shocks people, are 28. Because, it wasn't that long ago. They were all in school, middle school, high school, college. So 28, to your point, that means some of them have maybe been in the workplace 6 years, which means they're no longer the entry level. They might be supervised. They might even be directors. They could be. And to your point, boy, okay, so 5 years, wow, they may be here. And in 10 years, they may be here. So, yeah, it's amazing.
Well, to your point about time marches on, when I first joined my company in 1999, they had a big managers meeting, and the HR person stood up and said, this is 1999. The demographics of the company are 83% baby boomer. But this new generation, by the way, is Gen X, and they're coming. And now Gen X is retiring, and so we've lived long enough to see that. Yeah. And on the military, now I'm a retired Marine, and of course, the Marine Corps is not what it used to be. It's typical stuff, and it's because of the millennials, and like, fellas, we have already had millennials retire from the Marine Corps. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
New generations, so it never stops.
It never stops.
Well, listen, I can't let you out without asking you the fantasy question I ask everybody. If you were able to bring back one leader from the past and spend a day with that person, Mark, who would you choose and why?
Well, as I mentioned earlier at the very onset, I talked about, I really do believe I had a first 30-year career, and now I'm in my second 30-year career. I guess I'm officially 6 maybe 7 years into my next 30-year career. And so I mentioned, the first 30 years were focused. I was, not just worked at agency, but I was also focused on new business, prospecting, sales. And so there was a big focus on let's win some business, right? And so, but now, as I mentioned, my focus is really purpose. How can I purposely help, mentor, teach, all those things? So, I think about purposeful leaders, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, because I want to get into the idea of just, that's a different kind of leadership. That's not necessarily about leading a Fortune 100 company. It's a purposeful leadership. It's more of a societal leadership. And so at this point in my career, that's the kind of leaders I want to learn more about, learn what the inspiration was, learn how are they so mobilizing? How did they just engage people and bring them together for these critical societal initiatives? So that is, I would say, now where I am in my career. Purposeful leaders throughout history is where my focus is, as opposed to tech leaders or Fortune 100 leaders.
Yes. Well, one thing that I drew from this, and so it's another teaching point, you've already had a 30-year career. Your ambition is to have another 30-year career. So it's what I'm advising my executive clients, like you've done well, you've got the big payoffs and all of that, and you're 61 years old.
59.
Well, I'm telling the client this, when I retired at 57, I go to a longevity doctor, been going to that practice for 20 years. He looked me dead in the eye, Mark. Now we're talking to the older guys now, not Gen Zs. He looked me dead in the eye. Mike, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to relax and this and that and do this. He goes, listen to me. He looked right at me. If you don't get engaged in something you're passionate about, that excites you every day, that exercises your mind, you'll be dead within 5 years. I can show you empirical data from that. I'm like, what? He goes, I've had it happen. I've had perfectly healthy guys retire and they play golf every day. And it's almost like there's something in our bodies like, okay, he's done, start the process. And they start getting sick. That's all I had to hear. Yeah. And so what I'm telling him is, good for you. You've done it. You've got security, financial security. You got to get something. It could be anything. It could be teaching fly fishing, whatever. Yes, but you have. Yeah. And so that's where I'm at, Mark, is I can't wait to wake up every morning to help people become better leaders. And I see the same passion in you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I admire you, Mike, and I want to be you as I get into my next 30 years here. So I really admire everything you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. And, on a final note, Mark, people are going to want to contact you. How do they find your books? Where do they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've authored or co-authored 10 books. 4 of those books are focused on Gen Z, including the CEO book. Several of those books are focused on what I call win the job. They're focused on career transition. How many of those books? 3 of those books are focused on that. And then there's a couple of other books, one including my first book, 101 Lessons They Never Taught You in College, which is about how do you make the transition from college to career. So all the books, long story short, are all on Amazon under my name, Mark Beal, B-E-A-L. So if you just type my name in Amazon, you'll see all 10 books come up there. And then what I call my speaker site, markbealspeaks.com, is where, media coverage, there's video clips there probably of my TEDx speech and things like that on that site as well. And usually if I get an organization calls me and says, hey, we've heard about you, but we want to hear more or read more about you, and I give them that link, and then usually within 24 hours to back to me, like, we like what we saw. Let's bring you on board.
Yeah, I saw that as well when I was searching for. I got on there, so I saw your TEDx too. I thought it was brilliant. So, well, listen, my friend, thank you so much for this. It's going to be a very popular podcast, and I selfishly ask that you consider coming back and doing another one someday.
Of course, has been great. Anytime, Mike.
Super.
I would love to. Thank you very much. I really, I love everything you're doing.
Well, thank you, Mark. Best wishes for continued success, my friend. Take care.
Very much. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.